If you have stumbled upon this podcast, it's not by chance. I'm Alex, and I'm so excited for you to join me in each episode as I dive headfirst into the highs, lows, and utterly wild twists of my life. I take you on my journey to feeling fully aligned and unapologetically myself. I'm here to show you that everything in life happens for a reason and nothing is by chance. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back. Episode 2. I am I don't know if excited is the word to be recording this one, but I am just excited to be back for episode 2. Today's episode is going to be a deeply personal one. It is going to be an emotional one. I may cry. We don't know. It's a story time all around my mother's death and essentially what feels like the first awakening in my story. This podcast is all about sharing my story. It's all about transformation and sharing the things that happen to us in life that, you know, they really could send us in different directions. And this feels like the first fork in the road moment in my life where I could have kept going one way, but I chose to go another. And my mother's death was really the catalyst, I think, for a lot of change and transformation that came in my life. So it felt very fitting and right to start the story here. I will preface it by saying it's probably not going to be a light one. I am going to go into detail about my mother passing away and about her and my experience throughout losing her and the aftermath. But I think it's a really important part of the story. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with who my mum was. My mother was one of a kind. She truly was. She was one of the greats, one of the best. And I feel honestly so privileged that she was my mother. My mother was an incredibly complex human being. There were many layers to her, as to many humans. And she had so many beautiful sides to her. I'm going to take as much care as I can with this episode because I feel when somebody is no longer here to tell their side of the story or to tell their story in general, a certain amount of care should be taken, I feel, in talking about them. I really have reflected on this. I think my mum would want me to do this. I think she would love everything that I am putting out into the world. And I think she would be really proud of me. And I do think that she would want me to share a lot of this information. But I think for me, I really want to do it in a way that expresses my experience. And I want to hone in on the fact that it's not the complete story. It's not. It's only my side of the story. And I really want to say that because I think it's important to take care when you're telling somebody else's story. I will start with who my mother was. And wow, my mother was honestly the most incredible human. She was so beautiful. Physically, she was stunning, but internally, she was just such a unique, incredible woman. She was incredibly giving, incredibly generous. For example, we would go to the shops growing up and my mum she would give anything to anyone that needed it. If there was somebody there that, clearly needed money or was having a bad day, my mum would find a way to make their day special. She would give, and she had many times, much to my father's dismay, gave, our last $50 or $20 or whatever it was for the week. She would give that to the person that clearly needed it. So many times I remember growing up being at the shops after school or something like that, and there would be somebody there just having a really hard day, and she'd always find a way to get this information out of people. She had this way about her of drawing people in and getting them to open up and just deeply connecting with them. And they would tell her their life story, and my mum would tell hers back. And at the time I was young and I remember being like, can we just go home? Can we just go home? It's after school. I just want to go home and play Mario Kart or whatever the hell was on the list for the evening. In hindsight, those moments were really special. And I think that they shaped who I am as a person and really showed me that connection is just like so important, and how you can make somebody's day just with a smile or a conversation. And I have grown up, that is who I am as well now. I feel like anyone who knows me can probably attest to this, but I am the type that, yeah, if I'm on a walk or I am out and about, I will have a conversation with anyone and everyone. So I feel like I have very much learnt these traits from my mother. She was also incredibly smart, like so smart. She worked for Ford growing up, the dealership, and had no degree, no formal background, but she was their accountant essentially. And she worked her way up, and she was relied on so much throughout that company. She just worked her ass off, and she was there till like 11 o'clock at night. She was a very dedicated, hardworking woman. And then on top of that, like a triple threat here, she was also so incredibly creative. Like on another level, it was arts and crafts. We had a room dedicated in our house to arts and crafts, and just the room was lined wall to wall with art things and craft supplies and magazines. And oh my gosh, she was just incredible. She worked at a lot of different art shows and craft shows and sold quite a bit of her own stuff that she did back then. She had multiple cross stitches that were put into magazines and things like that. So she was just incredibly talented. Oh, she crocheted her own wedding dress. Like, who crochets their own wedding dress? And it was beautiful. I still have that. And she was just honestly an incredible human being, such a light in people's lives. She always saw the good in everything and just had this passion and essence for life that I think was very much contagious to be around. So she was so many more things than this, but I could sit here for hours and talk about how incredible my mum was, but she was truly the best. But then my mother had this other side of her life that she very much struggled a lot with, and she was incredibly chronically ill throughout most of my life. I remember being quite young, and it wasn't as bad as I was sort of in primary school and getting into my sort of earlier years of life, but she was always struggling with her health and mental health and her physical health. And she had illnesses such as chronic fatigue syndrome, narcolepsy, bipolar. She was on prescription medication most of my life and heavy stuff. And then, she suffered from chronic migraines, like really, really badly. She had multiple surgeries. Her hormones were just completely messed up. She had a hysterectomy when she was really young. She went through IVF to have me and my brother for like 5 years. So there was always a lot going on with her health. And growing up, unfortunately, there was a lot I feel that she missed out on and I missed out on as a child. My mother did the best that she could. She did not have the tools that we have now or that I have access to. She didn't know the things that I feel are way more mainstream now about health and well-being. And back then she really did take the Western route only with her health. She tried a few things a little bit more holistically, but never really got to the core of what was going on with her health. It's why I am the way that I am now. I am very holistic when it comes to health. Of course, I believe there is a place for Western medicine. Obviously, I just went through 6 months of chemotherapy and a whole other range of things. I believe it has its place, but I do not believe it's the whole picture. And my mother I don't think she ever really got the chance to explore it properly because she slowly declined and got worse and worse. So throughout my life, there was a lot. And again, I'm going to be very delicate with how I talk about this, but my mother was very manic at times, and especially towards the last decade of her life, she was on a lot of heavy prescription drugs, and her life was pretty much just a mix of being either asleep for days on end or being awake for days on end. And I feel that she struggled a lot with her mental health, especially during those times, of how to actually balance, her illness and everything that she was going through with trying to live a life. The hardest part about I feel my mum's illnesses was that it stopped her from living her life. She was, as I said, she was chronically fatigued all the time. She was always dealing with pain, always dealing with mental health issues and things like that. So she had this, it was really hard, I think, to be around for anyone that knew my mum, because she had this essence for life, this passion and this determination, but she could never get there because of her illness and the things that held her back. Geez, you wonder where I get this from. So it really, and to touch on that for a second, that is the reason I am the way I am. That is why I am such a determined person. It's why I do focus so much on my mental and physical health, because I grew up with a mother who suffered so much in life. And honestly, I looked at that, I think, growing up, and I was like, I refuse to do this. She really didn't, she didn't have the tools, I think. And she did try. To my mother's credit, she saw every doctor, every specialist, every person out there that could help her with her health. She saw them. I don't think she explored the holistic, more alternative side as much. And I personally have found so much help in that realm of the world. It will always be something I wonder. I don't think it's something I ever, I hold on to, but I am curious if she had have gone down a more holistic route and focused more on getting to the core rather than focusing on dealing with the symptoms. There's a place for both. I do wonder where her health could have been. It's something I'm never going to know. And it's something that I genuinely do just let go of, because I'm never going to know. So growing up, my mum being very ill, it was very difficult to have a relationship with her as her daughter. I also was going through so much myself as a teenager, naturally, and I was not an easy kid. And I guess I'm giving this context because it really does tell the story of why I am the way that I am and what I came from. I feel I've spent a lot of my life reparenting myself, and it's not to put down my parents. I love them and they have done the best that they possibly can. However, my mum was so sick growing up, and my dad was basically her full-time carer, that they really didn't have, I think, the capacity to fully be there and to parent the way that I think I needed to be parented. It's so hard for me to say that because I don't judge them. I really don't. I think that they did the best that they could. However, there was a lot of guidance missing from my life, a lot of mentorship that I feel I've sought after as I've gotten older. And I guess that leads me into who I was before my mother's death. And growing up, I was a very active child. I was very energetic. I was an incredibly smart kid, but it was never channeled in the right ways. And it ended up, I think, getting channeled into the wrong things. I very much became the naughty kid, right? I became the rebel growing up in high school. Even before that, I was the kid that would blow out candles at the birthday party. I was I know that is the annoying kid. I'm just going to say, I think that growing up, I didn't get enough positive attention, and therefore I sought it in other ways. So I did things because I was getting attention for it, but it wasn't good things. I think I got attention for being the bad kid. I think I got attention for being the rebel. I think I got attention for being the naughty one. And because I was getting attention for that, I think I lent into that. And not just attention, validation. I got enforcement that that's what I was. Oh, I'm the bad kid, so I'm going to just become that. And throughout my life, I can see that pattern over and over again. And it wasn't just there was so many beautiful traits to me as a kid. I'm not trying to put myself down here. There was so much about me that was incredible as well. I think we have both sides, but I can see growing up where I just lacked guidance, and I lacked really having somebody to help me navigate life. I feel I've had to go back and relearn or learn for the first time some of these things. My parents also let me do whatever I wanted. And they really didn't teach me consequences. And that becomes part of the story in a big way, because growing up, I kind of lived out those cycles and I did things without thinking about what the consequences were. For lack of a better term, I was very selfish growing up because I just didn't either care what the consequence was. I didn't understand what the consequence was. I just thought, and I think a lot of my life, people, including my parents, would bail me out. They wouldn't let me learn the lesson. My mother, I think, wanted to be more my best friend than she did anything else. And at times that was detrimental because I think she let things go in my childhood and even my teenage years that shouldn't have been let go. And I think it taught me the wrong ways in life, I feel. It made me get away with a lot, and I learnt very quickly how to emotionally manipulate my parents and people around me to get what I want. Again, I wasn't the worst kid in the world. There was so much good to me. I want to balance this out by saying this isn't just an episode where I'm going to bash myself, but these are important parts because I've had to relearn or learn for the first time so much that I feel are foundational things in life that you're taught as a kid and you're taught as a teenager that then become patterns throughout your life. And I think this is what I've learned about childhood, and I'm talking from 0 to 18, really. This is when all of your patterns and beliefs, and yes, there are earlier years that are more profound than others. However, our beliefs are created during those years. And for me, I think a lot of the beliefs were on the opposite of what I now teach myself and have for the past decade or so had to teach myself. And I don't think anyone meant any harm, but it has caused me a lot of suffering in life. I don't think my parents grew up intending to not be incredible parents. I think they did, honestly, the best that they could. They had so much stacked against them during that time. However, I'm not going to deny my experience, which is that I missed out on a lot of foundational things, I think, that you're taught during those years that are pivotal beliefs and pivotal guidance that helps to set you up for life. It's all perfect. I have worked through a lot of this now, and I accept so much of this. It's led me to who I am right now. However, it's part of the story. It's part of why I've gone through the things that I've gone through. So yeah, growing up, I got into a lot of trouble. I did. I got away with a lot. Nothing was really taught to me in a healthy way growing up. Some things were, don't get me wrong, but most of it, I learnt some very unhealthy ways of coping with life. And that is what I've spent the last 10 years really undoing, reparenting myself in a lot of ways. And talking to a lot of people in my life, this isn't uncommon. I think it's what happens when, you have parents who are dealing with some really difficult things and aren't able to be present in your life as much as they want. So growing up, I was a bit of a rebel. I definitely dealt with things in an unhealthy way. I did a lot of unhealthy things, a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, a lot of smoking from a young age. Just everything and anything you can think of, I pretty much did. And I'm not proud of that. I'm genuinely not. I want to preface this by saying I was a very difficult kid. I learnt how to manipulate very well when I was growing up. And I was like a dog with a bone. If I didn't get what I wanted, I would not stop until I got what I wanted. And I think my parents' tactic a lot of the time was just give her what she wants because she's not going to stop. So again, I'm not making excuses for them, but I think that's what went on during that time. So as the years went on, I became a very lost girl. From all of my teenage years to my 20s, really, I was a very lost girl, and I'm 33 now for context. I was just very lost, a very lost girl. And to be honest, if I was to think of what my mother was like during those years as well, is lost and very insecure and both of us, we were both just trying to do our best in life. I would say that I was a very scared little girl on the inside, but a very cocky, confident, outgoing girl on the outside, which makes a really bad mix. Again, I wasn't a horrible human. I was actually an incredibly giving, very loving, very caring young girl, I think and I'm still young, but you know what I mean, girl especially in my 20s. However, I put my needs above others more often than not, and not in the right ways. I lived a lot out of fear during those years. I made a lot of bad decisions during that time, a lot of decisions that hurt other people, and a lot of decisions that really hurt myself. And as I did the work years to come, I realized just how caught up in fear I was, that I would make decisions from a place of not wanting to regret something. I never wanted to regret a decision. So I always did things from a place of, I don't want to regret that. It really mucked with my moral compass at times. Life was very messy during those years. I actually asked a friend leading into this episode, my best friend, I asked her to talk to me about that time. She was probably the closest person to me during sort of mid-20s and when my mum passed away. And I asked her, what was I like? And she said, you were you. Incredibly generous, incredibly loving, incredibly ambitious about life, all of the good things, but you were also just very lost and very insecure and kind of just all over the place. I said the words erratic and she said yes. So all of this very much showed up in my life. Growing up, I was kicked out of every school that I was in. I was drinking, smoking from a very young age. My social life was like the forefront, hanging out with boys and hanging out with my best friends. That was just the only thing that I thought of. And I get that. That's pretty normal for teenage years. But I got up to a lot of trouble. Then the years later, after school, so I didn't end up finishing school. I left in year 11 and I went straight into the working world. At that point, I was sick of school. School and I never really gelled. I struggled to focus. I was bored a lot. And that's the thing. Like I said, I was a smart kid. I knew what I was doing. I didn't really care. I was bored a lot, but I pretty much went into the workforce. And from there, I just tried to figure my way through life. That is why I'm so passionate now, because I struggled so much growing up. It's why I'm passionate about conscious parenting for when I do have children. I'm very much passionate about just being a conscious person in general, a conscious partner, a conscious friend. It's just why I guess I am quite obsessed, some would say, with personal development, because I struggled so much growing up and into my 20s. So you kind of get the picture of who I was during that time. Very messy, very lost, making some pretty poor decisions. And I did not love the way that my life was going, but I had no idea how to figure it out. And I don't think I was even really conscious of how much I was struggling. And I was constantly always trying to move beyond these things in all areas, career. I wasn't happy with my career at the time. I wasn't happy with my money situation. I wasn't happy with my relationships. Like every area of life I was not happy in, and I was trying to figure it out. And honestly, kudos to past Alex. She was determined. She was just trying to figure it out. And I honestly have the utmost respect and love for that version of myself who just kept going. So that's sort of like my early 20s. And then 25 is when my mum passed away. And as you have heard throughout this episode, she was already very chronically ill, but her death was still really unexpected and really traumatic. Mum was sick my whole life, and there was a lot of anxiety that came along with that. I remember having panic attacks at sleepovers and when I was younger, and I had a real anxious attachment to my mum, leaving her because I was always afraid something would happen, but it never did. You think that you'd think having an ill mum my whole life might prepare me for it, but It really didn't. And yeah, so essentially she passed away from a heart attack. She was 63 years old, and the night that she passed away was incredibly traumatic. Not only did my mum die, but I was the one to find her as well. And I should probably go back a step. So I guess you could say the decline, or where it sort of all started, was 3 weeks before my mum passed away. She was in the hospital and she was really, really sick, and she was having chronic migraines. I mean, she was having chronic migraines her whole life, but in particular, they were really, really, really bad, to the point where she was needing to be hospitalized, and she had some other things going on. And they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't figure out what was going wrong and what was happening during that time. She started to feel a little bit better. I think she was in hospital for like a week, and she started to feel a little bit better, and they sent her home. And I remember visiting my mum during that time, and it's so crazy when I look back, because there's so many moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, like the last time you're going to speak to someone, or the last moment you're going to have with that person of that kind. And I remember visiting her at the hospital, and I was talking to my mom, and I was really scared. Like, something felt different about this time. In hindsight, I see it. At the time, it just felt off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. It's not like in my head I was thinking my mom's going to die. Something felt different. She'd been sick my whole life. So I was very used to hospitals. I was very used to doctors. I was very used to her, being really ill. But this time just felt off. It just felt different this time. And I remember going and seeing her at the hospital, and something about her felt different as well. My mum was, as I said, she was incredibly determined, and almost to her detriment when it came to her health. She would hang on to anything she could, where she almost couldn't accept that she was as sick as she was. I think sometimes she felt like accepting she was sick would mean giving up instead of just accepting where she's at and working from that place. I think sometimes she felt like if she accepted her illness and accepted where she was at, it would be like giving up. She hated being called a sick person. She hated anything sort of her identity being attached to being sick. It's why I've even found it hard to record this episode a little bit, because it's like, I don't want my mom to be only identified as that for her. I know she wouldn't want that. And that's why I've tried my best to paint the picture of the woman she is from all areas, from all sides. And there were so many sides to her, but I think that at the end of the day, she was very sick. She was very ill, and that's just the reality of the situation. And I remember when I visited her in the hospital during this time, she was almost resigned, or she was almost accepting. I don't know what the right word is, but there was this essence about her of acceptance. Like, there was this calmness about her that I'd never seen before. Even though she was incredibly sick, I think she was just defeated. I think she was so sick of being sick at that point. She'd spent her entire life feeling that way, that I think she just was done. Quite honestly, I think she was just so defeated at that point. And that's what I feel like I felt from her in that conversation. It was, in a way, it was a calmness, because she was not her usual hyperactive self, but there was an air of defeatedness more than anything else. So 3 weeks later, or 2 weeks later, whatever it was, she came out of the hospital, and just at home, she still had that sort of defeatedness to her. She was just on the couch, very much out of sorts, and wasn't able to do much, to be honest, which was a lot of her life towards the end. It was very much sitting on the couch, or asleep in bed, or just trying to have some kind of a normal life, which just wasn't really there for her, which I think is the saddest part. My mum never got to live a normal life. So the night she passed away, it was a Friday night. I had been at work that day. I'd had a normal day. I actually had a great day with my best friend at work. I remember getting home and I was just feeling quite good that night. I went and got a bottle of wine. I got El Jana for dinner. And I remember my last moment with my mom was in the kitchen plating up my El Jana. I lived at home at that time. And I was plating up El Jana and she asked if she could have some. And to this day, I don't remember exactly what I said. I don't remember exactly what she said. I gave her some chicken and that was it. And yeah, I think I ate my dinner and then I went back upstairs, and the rest of the night I was just in my room enjoying a wine, watching TV, just decompressing from the week. And then so it was not unusual for my mum to just hang out downstairs and watch TV. And yeah, I remember coming downstairs for whatever reason, and something felt off in the living room. The lights were off, but the TV was on, and the TV was like a little bit, it was like on pause. And I walked downstairs and I could sort of, I don't know, something felt off. And I walked through the house and I thought maybe she was out the back having a cigarette, but she wasn't there. And I was like, this is just weird. Like she wasn't on the couch when I walked past. She wasn't outside. And yeah, I walked back past and it's like something caught my eye on the ground, and I just turned and it was my mum on the ground, passed out. Well, I thought she was passed out at the time. And yeah, it was incredibly from that point. And I honestly have debated how much detail to give about this point because it is full on and it's very hard to share with the world the most traumatic moment in your life. And I also am really aware of keeping of the privacy of my family as well. So for that reason, I'm not going to go into too many more specifics around this, but yeah, we found her, we tried to resuscitate her, and she was already gone for quite a while, is what the first responders told us. So I found her on the ground. It was crazy because at that moment, my brother just happened to come home from work as well. And yeah, I just remember screaming my head off. I remember my dad coming downstairs, my brother coming in, and it just from there is just an absolute blur of chaos and trauma. So the next few hours from that point, I mean, I do remember a lot of stuff vividly. Like it's weird. There's so many moments that I remember vividly, and then there's so much stuff that is just an absolute blur. But it was intense. It was very intense and very traumatic and just very sad. Very, very sad to find your mother dead and then to have to try to resuscitate her. It's something that I think will stay with me for the rest of my life. And so after that, I mean, it really is just a blur. The days, the weeks, the months, it goes as you can imagine. I had so many incredible people around me at that time who just dropped what they were doing and took care of me. And that point in my life was just I was already really a mess during that point in my life. I made some really bad decisions and just didn't like the way that I was living my life. So for that to have happened, it's like a bomb went off in my life. And yeah, I was bit of a mess. So the days after, I do remember little bits here and there, but to be honest, it's weird. The night of, I actually remember a lot of details, but the days after are what I feel quite sketchy on, and they feel quite blurry. I remember a lot of my friends coming over. I remember a lot of my mum's friends coming over, a lot of people around us during that time that just took care of us. I am forever, forever grateful for those people during that time. People just stepped up in ways that I'd never experienced before, of feeling so much love and so much care and thoughtfulness during that time. A silver lining during that time, And something that I know my mum will forever be grateful for was her wake. The funeral itself was very emotional and so many people turned up, which is a testament to who my mother is. However, the wake after, that was a party. That was an actual party, and anyone who came would know what I'm talking about. Obviously, it was incredibly sad, but I think that night we all just kind of like focused on the celebration of my mother and rather than, the loss. And that night, of course, was difficult, but in a lot of ways it was so beautiful. And I just know my mum would have loved that night. I think she would have loved that that's how she went out, was us really celebrating her life. So the weeks and months after really are a bit of a blur. I think I just tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Again, it was such a shock that she had actually passed away. I really did not see it coming. And I remember feeling like very messy. I remember feeling very sad. I remember feeling exhausted. Just trying to keep life going. I was so incredibly blessed during that time to have people around me who wanted to just take care of me. And even during that time, my team and the business that I worked for really, really showed up and just wanted to take care of me as much as they could. However, during that time, as I described before, I was in a very messy place in my life. As I said, I'd made some really poor decisions, and my mother's death made me, and I've thought about this, like what it was that I did after that. And it really made me take radical responsibility for my life. It may not have been all in one go, but my mum passing away and the months after, I just clicked into this gear of enough is enough. I do not want to live my life like this anymore. I'd hurt people previously. I had done things that were really selfish and just not the way that I wanted to live life. It's not who I really was deep down. I really was making a lot of decisions out of fear and out of the wrong places. And I didn't want to be that way anymore. And to go from having that realization to actually figuring out your life, I think it's a process. And that's what I went through. I went through a big process of shedding and just looking at every area of my life and being like, what is serving me and what isn't. I didn't have the tools or the mindset to really do this effectively. So it was very messy, but I just came to a place of like, enough is enough. I'm sick of my own shit and I'm going to change. And from there, this real transformation of my life, it was really where it started, and it would be years to come. But it was the first moment in my life. Like I said, it was the fork in the road moment of which way am I going? Am I going to continue being the person I am and doing the things I'm doing, living the cycles that I'm living, showing up the way that I am, feeling the way that I do? Because even though I was doing a lot of things that I thought I wanted, it wasn't, and it didn't make me feel good. So about a year after my mum's death and sort of figuring all of that out and going through it alone was when I met my first mentor and teacher, Natasha. And Natasha would forever become my greatest teacher and somebody so important in my life. She was a kinesiologist and an energy worker. She was a naturopath. She was, there's so many things that she was. It's actually like hard to put into a sentence what her background was, but she was just an incredible woman. She was an incredible, incredible woman. And I am saying was because unfortunately she's no longer here anymore, but she became the first mentor in my life to really help me navigate and figure myself out. And that was the start. That was the beginning of working through so much shit, and holy shit. I remember the first session with her the first couple of sessions were so intense and just like blew my mind. I don't think I'd ever understood emotions properly. I'd never understood how to regulate my emotions. I never understood why I did the things that I did. She was the first person to make me feel like I'm not a bad person. I'm just making some bad decisions, and why I'm making these decisions. She just helped me to understand myself so much more than I could on my own. And from there, I just started to develop proper self-confidence and work through so many of the insecurities I had. And it didn't happen all at once. I was still making decisions in hindsight that were not that healthy, but I was starting to understand myself, and it was like step by step, baby steps towards better. And during this time, I also met a guy. I'd been single for a while after that, and I met a guy towards sort of the 1.5 year mark of after losing mum. And he, even though the relationship didn't work out, and even though he and I were not right for each other, he was somebody really important during that time as well. He was also one of the healthiest relationships I had at the time, which is saying a lot, but at the time, and he helped to show me who I am. And I spent a lot of my years growing up thinking I was a bad kid, that I was just the rebel, that I was just the naughty kid, that I was a bad person and did bad things, and that's just who I was. But that's not who I was, and that's not what was really going on. And this guy in my life, he helped believe in me before I could believe in myself. And in conjunction with everything else I was doing with Natasha at the time, and with it wasn't just Natasha, it wasn't just kinesiology that I was doing. I mean, even before my mum passing away, as you can hear, I was always trying to get my shit together. And back in my early 20s, I was more focused on like how to make the money and how to, because I always thought the money led to the happiness. My ego did a lot of driving in the early years, which I think that's pretty normal. But I wanted the status. I wanted to, like, my first like visions growing up was I wanted to be a CEO or a COO of a big business. I worked in insurance in my 20s, and I wanted to climb my way up the corporate ladder, and I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be somebody in the corporate world, and it's so far from what I want for my life. But I guess you could say I was never not ambitious, and I never wasn't trying to grow and trying to do better, but I just didn't know how. And I was focused on the wrong things, or focused on things that were still unhelpful. And so then when mum died, it was like, it really set me on a path towards better. Yeah, I had to process a lot during that time. A lot of the things that I had done in my life that caused a lot of shame. I had to forgive myself a lot. I had to really look at all areas of my life. I let go of a lot of relationships during that time. And then when my mum passed away, it's like it redirected me. And again, it didn't happen overnight. It was still very messy afterwards, and it was like a baby step process of years to come. But it helped me to course correct. And I think if I was to say, like, what was the main thing during that time, it was radical responsibility and accountability. I just took so much accountability during that time for who I was, my actions, the things that I did, the person that I showed up as. And again, it didn't happen overnight, but that moment of, okay, enough is enough, I don't want to be this person anymore, was the beginning of something incredible. And I really do look back and I think about past Alex and my 20s Alex, and she went through so much. She really did. Past Alex is incredible, and she faced so many demons and so much. She got me here now, and it's 8 years later, and honestly, this is the best place I've ever been in my life. I have never felt more sure of myself. I've never felt more confident in who I am. I've never felt more in love with who I am. And you're gonna hear me repeatedly say this. It's the thing that I'm most proud of is my mind and the inner world that I have created. And it's all because of these moments that didn't happen by chance. I think that they all happened towards my evolution. Not by chance is a mindset. I completely respect if there's people out there that don't want to see everything that's happened in their life as happening for them. I really do get it. I could easily look at the cancer and be like, that didn't happen for me. I could easily turn around and just be like, it was just horrible, and that's all there is to it. But I choose to see the world with a not by chance mindset, that everything does happen for my evolution, that everything does happen for me, and it directs me towards everything. And my mother's death is no different. I believe that it's happened for me. I believe that it has helped to direct me towards more of what I want in life. And it's helped me to become the woman that I am now. And it's a woman that I am very proud of. And where I'm at with my mum, it's been 8 years, as I said, and every year has been so different. Grief is just incredibly complex, and every year has been something different, or something I've worked through something different, or I've felt something different. The first years after, I just remember feeling so much sadness and so much like grief, just so much loss. And as the years went on, I stopped feeling so intense about that. I still feel her loss and I still miss her every day, but it stopped becoming so intense and so almost hypersensitive. However, it's like the dust has settled now, and on the other side, I am now dealing with the relationship we did have and the reality of the situation. For a few years there, I think I put my mum on a pedestal because she wasn't here anymore. And I really wanted to have such a strong connection with her. I almost put our relationship on a pedestal, even though that's not what it was like when she was alive. And what that did was almost dismiss a lot of the experience and the emotions that I did feel when she was alive. So a lot of what I've been doing over the last couple of years in particular, but this last year very much so, is trying not to dismiss my experience when she was alive, and very much healing and dealing with a lot of those layers. It's very much unresolved in a lot of ways. I honestly have only just recently learned so many things about why I live the way that I live in some ways. And I didn't realize that these were open wounds that I still had around my mum. And I actually am doing some more work coming up around this with an incredible practitioner who is going to be helping deal with a lot of these things, because it's showing up still in my world. So the work is never done. And I think that's life. I think it is. And I accept that. I accept that these things, like, they're not going to be perfect. So I guess my point is there's a real complexity to grieving, and you can miss somebody so much, you can love somebody so much, but still be upset with them and still be angry at them and still have resentment and underlying unresolved issues. And I think the hardest part about that is when it's somebody that is no longer here, you can't deal with them with the person. You've got to deal with them on your own. And I think that's a very difficult place to be. I don't know where my mum and I would actually be at if she was still alive to this day, whether she would be receptive to working on these things. I'd like to think she would, but I'll never know that. And I think that's something that I've just had to accept, that I've got to do what I can on my own. And it's something I'm very much still navigating, of how do you deal with unresolved issues with somebody who's dead? And how do you miss somebody so much and grieve somebody, yet still have things that do impact you in a negative way? So that's where I'm at, is very much navigating that way. And I feel that I've come a long way, but there's still way to go. And I think that that's just part of grief. I think that it is very complex, and I think it's going to come up in so many different ways. Like, for example, when I go to weddings, I get very emotional. For obvious reasons, I love weddings, but I see the mother of the bride, or even sometimes when my friends are, having babies, and they, I think when I have a baby and when I get married, those will be two incredibly difficult times, because whilst they'll be filled with so much joy, I do think that it will be very emotional to not have my mum here. But also what I go through is, I don't even think if she was alive that she would have been well enough to be able to be there during those times either. So it's grieving not only the fact she's not here anymore, but it's almost grieving who she wouldn't have been able to be in my life during those times anyway. So it's complex, and it's a journey, and it's something that I'm working through now. And it is very ongoing. So if anything in this episode was a little bit all over the place, that's why, because I think there's still a lot of stuff that I am processing and will process for years to come. And I try to have a relationship and a connection with my mum now that she's not here. I journal a lot to her. I write her every anniversary. I celebrate her life. I take that time. I don't work, and I don't, do anything really on that day except for honor her and honor myself on that day. Her birthday, the same thing. I really take the time to celebrate her, and that feels good for me because I feel like I'm connecting with her. And then outside of that, I journal to her and I constantly talk to her. I have photos up everywhere all over my house of her, and I'm always connecting with her. So I do feel my mum with me a lot, and I really do believe that she has been with me in some pretty hard times, and I have felt her presence. I think looking down on me, I think through the cancer series, I very much felt her with me a lot, and I think that she would have been very proud of me. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up now because I think that was quite the story time. I think I got out everything that I wanted to say. I'm not going to lie, these episodes are difficult because there's so much to say. There's so much during those times, and I'm trying to paint the picture and get a lot of this stuff out to give you the context, but then also do justice to the story as well, and to the person and to the experience at the time. And I just want to say a big thank you to the people during that time that really showed up for me. And there's so many people in different ways. Some people I think wouldn't even realize how important they were during that time, but they just meant so much to me, and they honestly got me through an incredibly hard time in my life. And I honestly don't think I would have been as okay without them. So I will forever be grateful for those people in my life. And I just want to say thank you to you. Maybe you'll be listening to this, maybe you won't be, but thank you for being there during that time. You made an incredibly difficult time in my life that much more bearable, and helped me to reconnect to who I am and showed me who I am. So thank you. Thank you to past Alex. Oh my gosh, I honestly have so much love for her. I really do. I have so much love for my past self, who just stepped up during that time and took on so much and felt so many hard emotions, so much shame, had to forgive herself for so much, and essentially go on a journey of reparenting herself and relearning so much. And I just, thank you, past Alex. I'm so grateful for you. And thank you to my mum, Kath Manstead, the great Kath Manstead. I have so many words that I could say about that woman, and you've heard me say a few today. Mama, just know that I love you, and I am eternally grateful to be your daughter. And to you, thank you for listening. If you are somebody that is going through an incredibly hard time at the moment, maybe you've gone through something similar to what I've just detailed, or you're going through your own version of something, please just keep going. Please know that you will get there. As you can see through my story, I got there, and you will too. And I don't say this flippantly, but please reach out to me if you want to talk. You can find me on my Instagram at Alex Manstead. That's probably the best way to message me. But if you want to talk to someone, I am here. And I really, really do not say that lightly. I genuinely want to be somebody that is there for people. And that's part of this podcast. So please reach out to me if you want to talk to me about anything you've heard in this episode, or anything to do with what you're going through. Keep going. We've got this. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you loved this episode, please share it with a loved one, and I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and a comment. It really helps to support my podcast and get my message out there. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Alex Manstead. And one of my favorite things to do is have chats with people about life. Nothing is too big or too much, so please feel free to message me. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, dream big, love deeply, and live boldly.